Tonight on VSRF Live, we welcome Dr. Angus Dalgleish, one of the world's leading oncologists and cancer immunologists, for a discussion on plausible mechanisms of COVID-19 injections causing cancer and attacks on scientific publications and research.
Following a booster vaccine, we were getting IgG immunoglobulins switching, so you converted the immune system from being aggressive, fighting invaders, to one of tolerization. So therefore, the immune system was tolerating the cancer, and this was the reason that we were starting to see it. However, it is important at this stage to say that we were getting reports after I first reported this of other cancers.
Hello and welcome to VSRF Live. I'm Livio Sanchez. Thank you so much for joining us. Over the past several years, questions surrounding COVID-19 vaccine safety have generated intense debate among physicians, researchers, public health officials, and patients around the world. While much of that discussion has focused on acute adverse events, some scientists and clinicians have raised concerns about potential longer-term health consequences and whether certain observations reported in clinical practice deserve further investigation. At the same time, concerns have emerged about scientific transparency itself. Are researchers free to pursue difficult questions wherever the evidence leads? And what happens when scientists challenge prevailing narratives on issues with enormous public health implications? Earlier this month, many of those questions took center stage in Washington, D.C., when Senator Ron Johnson convened a U.S. Senate hearing titled Plausible Mechanisms of COVID-19 Injections Causing Cancer and Attacks on Scientific Publications and Research. Among those called to testify was Dr. Angus Dalgleish, one of the world's leading oncologists and cancer immunologists. The hearing focused on cancer biology, vaccine safety science, published research, and the broader question of whether open scientific inquiry is being encouraged or discouraged. Tonight, we're honored to welcome back Dr. Dalgleish to discuss the hearing, the testimony presented before the Senate, and the questions that continue to generate discussion throughout both the medical and scientific communities. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone about the VSRF petition to repeal the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. If you haven't already signed, we encourage you to do so and to share it with your family, friends, and communities. Every signature helps us advance transparency, accountability, and informed consent. Your voice matters, and we sincerely appreciate your participation and support. Janet will put the link in the chat. And now I'd like to welcome the founder of the Vaccine Safety Research Foundation, Steve Kirsch. Steve, welcome to VSRF Live. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Livio. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm really excited. I got to meet Dr. Dalgleish at the Better Way conference, and what a wonderful man he is. Before we bring him on, though, I want to bring our attention to a story that is about a New York City firefighter. You've met, Steve, we both met O'Brien Pastrana, and he was vaccine injured. He was vaccine injured not once, but twice by the COVID shot. Even though he was clearly injured by the first shot, New York City and the fire department of New York forced him to get the second one, which permanently disabled him. And he is fighting for his full pension, but the courts denied him, so he has appealed. I'm going to pop this on the screen. He is fighting for his full pension, but the courts denied him, so he has appealed. His attorneys are Sujata Gibson and exemption lawyer backed by Children's Health Defense. And if you're in New York City next week, Monday, June 22nd at 2 p.m., please come to the Thurgood Marshall U.S. Courthouse, 40 Foley Square, New York City, 17th floor, room 1703. He needs our support at the courthouse. It's unbelievable to me, Steve, that these cases are not getting resolved in the favor of those that were injured and lost their livelihoods. It's just astonishing to me that this continues.
Yeah. You would think it'd be more obvious, but it's very troubling.
Yeah, extremely troubling. Now, there was one bit of good news, and I saw you tweet about this because you wrote a Substack about the published paper that was then removed by the I think it was which journal was it? The editor-in-chief of Toxicology
Reports.
Yeah, and then Bobby actually put out a letter to demand that they share why were these papers removed. That's a good move right here.
Yeah, and they'll get a bullshit answer, I'm sure.
I would imagine. Yeah, but maybe he's pushing them hard enough to actually have to share.
But you see, the issue is that the COPE guidelines were not violated here. It doesn't rise to the level of retraction. They're supposed to be following the COPE guidelines. The COPE guidelines have specific guidelines for when a paper gets retracted. So if you did, so for example, he did a comparison. Like when you have an anomaly like this, there's no valid comparison because there is no accepted, here's what the VAERS normal reporting pattern looks like, so that we can show that this is a statistical anomaly. So it just it allows the journal to hide behind, well, we didn't think it was it was valid. Well, what changed?
Right. After all those years, what happened?
Right. After 5 years, what changed? What made it suddenly invalid now?
And are other papers being removed by whatever methodology they use to remove this paper?
It depends on how the paper was done and what the paper claims. This paper just says, hey, this looks like a statistical anomaly. We should investigate. This, there should be greater investigations of this statistical anomaly. It's in Table 2 and Table 3 of his paper, and it shows that instead of what you normally expect in VAERS, which is day 0 reporting is high, day 1 reporting is lower, and then it goes down from there. What happened is that the day 0 reporting was at one rate, but the day 2 reporting was at a very high rate, and then it went down to day 3 reporting. So So here's how that you could argue that is that if they actually do it on calendar days rather than 24 hours from the shot, right? Because is it the next day? Is it 24 hours from the time of the shot, or is it the next calendar day, right? Because they're different things. 24 hours is different than the next calendar day. So suppose pediatricians are always giving kids the shots at 11 p.m. at night. Then on a calendar day basis, there'll be very few events on day 0 and or at day 1, and a lot more events on day 2 just by normal observational biases. So, yeah,
Seems pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah, there's a if it had been on the day after, so not the one day later, then it would be even more obvious. So when it's a spike on the second day, then you could reasonably argue that if you're counting a day based on calendar day, that, infants are normally vaccinated later in the day, or something like that.
Right.
But I really don't think that the correlation is real, and I don't see how. I interviewed Jennifer, who was a former police detective at the Omaha Police Department. She investigated about 250 cases over 7 years of SIDS and found that about 50% of the cases happened within 48 hours after a vaccine shot.
Within 48 hours. So that's pretty close.
After a vaccine shot. Okay. Yeah. So there's no way that SIDS is also going to be happening 48 hours before the next vaccine shot.
Right. It's impossible.
Right. Well, I mean, the baby's dead at that point.
Exactly. Well, let's bring on our featured guest, Dr. Angus Dalgleish. Dr. Dalgleish, welcome to VSRF Live. How are you doing, sir?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking very forward to this.
It's an honor to have you here, and I'm going to read your bio before we begin your interview with Steve. Dr. Angus Dalgleish is Professor Emeritus of Oncology at City St. George's University of London and one of the world's leading oncologists and cancer immunologists. Over a distinguished career spanning more than 4 decades, he has made significant contributions to the fields of cancer, immunotherapy, oncology, and HIV research. A graduate of University College London, he is a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians, the Royal College of Pathologists, and the Academy of Medical Sciences. His pioneering work has helped advance our understanding of cancer immunology and led to innovative approaches to cancer treatment, including immunotherapies and cancer vaccines. Dr. Dalgleish has authored or co-authored more than 500 peer-reviewed scientific papers and over 70 medical book chapters. His research and clinical work have focused on melanoma, prostate, pancreatic, and glioma cancers, earning him international recognition as a physician, scientist, and leader in the field of oncology. Dr. Dalgleish, thank you for joining us. And also, before I release you with Steve, I want to remind everyone that actually we're pre-recording this interview for scheduling purposes, so there will not be an audience Q&A at the end of the show. But go ahead and chat away in the chat and put some questions, and if we can get them to Angus after the show, I will ask him, and maybe we can get some responses later on. Okay, Steve, take it away.
All right, so I've got a big responsibility here to ask you all the questions that our audience would want to know. I'm going to start with the SIDS thing. Like when you see a distribution like that, are you familiar with the Miller paper at all?
Yes.
Okay, so normally in virus you see it's high on day 0, goes lower on the next day, goes normal and so forth, because people are more likely to report something to VAERS when they know it happens immediately after the shot. So there's this normal monotonically decreasing rate of reporting. Here it was not that. It was that the first day of, let's say it's like 100, then the next day was like 200, and then the third day was 100. So you don't see a pattern like that if it's just reporting bias. And so what's stunning is that 5 years after the paper is published, the journal removes the paper and can't cite any COPE guideline that justifies retraction or even gets close to removal. The only thing they did cite is that we decided that this has to be removed because this paper can be a risk to public health, because the paper basically calls for further investigation on whether this correlation that's observed is real or not. Now, how could calling for an investigation to determine whether there's causality or not be a danger to public health? I don't understand that. And I wrote to the editor and he wouldn't answer any questions. And he said he was advised by legal counsel not to answer any questions. So we're left to guess as to how calling for further investigation can jeopardize people's health. Can you explain that?
No, I can't.
Sure can.
No, I cannot. But it immediately triggers in my memory the very similar things. We've been fighting papers being retracted, withdrawn for the last 5 years with the SARS and the COVID therapies, vaccines as they call it, inverted commas. And it has been very sinister. And we know that there's a full-time group of people funded by, actually I've been told it's funded by Pfizer and the NIH to just make sure that everything out there doesn't make people lose confidence in the vaccines. Well, I mean, this is just an excuse for censorship, basically. This is what's going on. And in the ones that really struck me that I've been involved with in citing, looking at very carefully, we had the Gibco paper from Japan in Curious, where they were so annoyed that they showed that the cancer incidence increased with each booster vaccine, and it was clearly very causal with no other explanation. I mean, they really hassled the editor, and he stood his ground. And the next thing you know, Springer Nature's bought Curious, withdrawn the paper, and walked away and said, "Carry on." I mean, it's unbelievable. And then you have the paper of Cooperwasser and El-Deiry, pointing out the epidemiology, and here are very good reasons why they could be cause and effect. We're not saying, but there's a big flag, we must do something about it. They didn't even bother contacting the editor. They just cyber attacked the entire journal and took it down. And it was, the irony was, this is to shut it up, the irony was that the Daily Mail had been primed that this was going on. So the Daily Mail online ended up with a full article, a picture of the paper about the vaccines and cancer, which they suspected was the reason it was taken down, and basically gave it to 7 million people who read the Mail online. So the idea of trying to shut it down and capture it so people in the community would know, now everybody knows about it. And Wafik, of course, was at the Senate giving evidence. So I immediately think that this is part and parcel of the censorship that's going on. And they've done all the recent stuff, so now they're looking at stuff that's been out there for ages, which is inconvenient, and it would be better if they withdrew it. The reasons they give are absolutely spurious and specious. They're just ludicrous, and they expect us to take that seriously, and the editors. But as it came up, the big problem is all these journals now, they're in hock to big pharma advertising or some similar dependency on them. So they do, in the end, what they're told, or the people have to resign, and they rarely seem to do that.
Yeah, it's very disturbing. So before we got started today, you were talking about what's happening, I think, at your tennis club, right? With members there. Can you did I get that right? And can you relay
Well,
that
I just
story?
said I gave an example that the link with sudden cancers and the booster vaccine is so obvious that there's even been 2 or 3 cases, just smaller than the tennis club. And I don't want to give any details that might associate this, but it's just quite staggering that those people who stopped having the booster vaccine, they seem to be all okay. But the people who've been very pleased that they've been able to have these booster vaccines and keep safe have mysteriously gone down with cancers which fit in with what I've been seeing. So the cancers are presenting after 1 or 2, 3 boosters, and they're presenting. It looks like they're fairly early grade, quite good, but they go in and start examining, investigating them, and then they suddenly think, oh, actually, no, it's a grade up further than we thought. But however, no problem, we'll treat it, what have you. And then they treat it with therapies which should deal with it without worrying too much. And the next thing they've had to go on to another therapy because the tumour's upgraded and it's spread. Now, this is happening too often from my experience, where these sort of cancers, things do present like that every now and then, but it seems to be getting close to the norm these days. And the association with the booster vaccine is the one thing that differentiates what we saw. The type of patient I saw present before, they would very rarely present the way we're seeing them now. And the colorectal surgeons sum it up very well. And there's quite a few now who are brave enough to speak out and say that since the vaccine, we are seeing the majority of colon cancers appear at stage 3 or stage 4, whereas before the vaccines, that would be very rare to present the stage 4. They'd present early, cut it out, deal, treat, etc. And then they're saying, and the other thing is they're rapidly getting younger. And again, they're associated with the vaccines, which they should never ever had. Now, as they love saying, all these associations are not causality. Yeah, we are fully aware of that. But even if we can't prove it, the risk is so high, they should just be abandoned. You should stop all booster vaccines here and now, and all messenger RNA development for infectious diseases, because the evidence is screaming. And they say, well, you still haven't got proof. Yes, there's plenty of proof out there, but as you just mentioned with that paper, they're going out of the way to remove the proof or make sure people don't know about it or retract. I can't get any of the patients to have their spike protein measured, even though it's really, really easy. They don't want it to be done. I can't get samples of tissues from post-mortems that I know is almost certainly been caused by the vaccine. They won't give access to it. The coroners won't do this. And it's everywhere. I find that colleagues in Australia, New Zealand, Europe here, it's the same sort of attitude everywhere. It's like they've been told they're not allowed to look for it. In the rare cases, when they've been able to get hold of specimens, and Ryan Cole was one of the first, and others have confirmed, you can find the messenger RNA of the vaccine integrated into the tumour. Now, that alone, just a few cases, should be enough to stop the whole thing. And I'm particularly furious with the MHRA, who claim to follow the FDA, but the MHRA are meant to be a thinking organisation themselves. They boast that they're looking after your health and safety, and 12 yellow cards are enough to give cause that they will halt a drug. They sat on 48,000 yellow cards for AstraZeneca and did nothing. AstraZeneca withdrew their vaccine for commercial reasons. They thought that as it was being linked to so many strokes and deaths, it wasn't terribly good for their image. They should never have had to do that. They should have had it withdrawn as soon as they'd had 100 or so of these yellow cards saying it. And also, their job is to weigh up. What is the need for this drug or vaccine relative to what's going on out there? And had they thought about that one iota, the whole lot of them, I blame the whole lot, the chief medical officer, chief scientific officer, all the advisors, sage, if one of them had thought just a little, used the brain for half a minute, they would realize there's no need for any of these vaccines because they're all targeted at a variant that disappeared a long time ago. And we all warned them that this type of vaccine will actually limit the ability to respond to variants, which we've seen. I've spoken to two people in the last couple of days who actually told me that they were very upset because when they had a booster vaccine, they had the worst COVID ever imaginable and were bedbound for a week. And I mean, that is just ludicrous to actually get the disease. We know why, because it suppresses the T cell response and switches on a tolerizing IgG. It's nearly like you're deliberately trying to make people unwell.
Not that that would ever happen. There would have to be a conspiracy theorist to conjecture that. There's certainly no evidence that they're doing this deliberately that I have seen. Now, have you seen any evidence that would lead you to believe that this is done on purpose to try to injure people? Or do you think that this is companies who are trying to make a buck and are trying to create a product that they think will help people, but it simply ended up backfiring and they don't want to let the public know that, whoops, we made a big mistake, because nobody seems to want to talk about it? I mean, do you think these vaccines have any benefit at all?
Zero. They've got nothing but harm. There's no way in the world you can justify giving them for anything at all. And it's even worse than that. They should never have used messenger RNA technology. It's totally uncontrollable. It's like trying to invent an animal that can herd cats. I mean, it really is completely, they're uncontrollable by their nature of basically immortalizing them with the genetic engineering, the pseudo-uridines, etc. So they should be, have been totally withdrawn. Now, to answer your question, I've been to our parliament, when it went to the Senate recently, but I've been to our parliamentary investigations, which are similarly poorly attended by the people who ought to be there. And the first couple we said, you mustn't give these vaccines to these following people. And if at all, the second was, it's clear they're causing so much danger, they ought to be pulled. The third time I was there was to say, it is obvious they're causing all sorts of problems. Why are you still bullying people like me? I've been asked to have 2 COVID boosters because I'm at risk in the last 6 months, plus flu, RSV, plus shingles, plus pneumovax.
Yeah. Well, as soon as they mention that flu shot, they are not scientists, right? Because the flu shots don't work.
Exactly.
And, it's a tell when they say you need to get your flu shots to come here. It's a tell that these people are telling you to do stuff that is meaningless or harmful.
Harmful because they give you Guillain-Barré, if nothing else. But the point I was going to make about going to the Parliament, and I had this sort of minder, this senior civil servant looking after me and making sure I went to the right place and didn't go to the wrong places. And I said to you, you've heard the evidence. I said, why on earth are they still bullying me to have these useless, dangerous COVID boosters? And you know what he said to me? And it's exactly what he said. He said, I think you will find that the government bought so many of the bloody things, they feel they ought to use them up. That might be closer to the truth. It's unbelievable. I don't know how many.
Probably is.
I don't know how many the UK bought, but I know that the EU bought 10 for every citizen. Australia bought 10 for every citizen. So it's likely we bought 10 too. And they were bought and prepaid. I mean, how mad was that? And I've gone back to old vaccine books, textbooks years ago, and that say things that if a vaccine needs a booster, it probably doesn't work. If it needs a third booster, it will do serious harm to the immune system because it will suppress it. They knew this 30 years ago, and they can't say, oh, we didn't know. This is an emergency. It's what they've done. This is a worldwide pandemic. No, it wasn't. It was just a pandemic of fear, which, from my point of view, clinically, what I saw was not an awful lot different from a very bad flu season. The average age of death in the UK was 82 from COVID. The average age of death from people dying not with COVID was 81. So, by definition, there was no reason to have lockdown, any special emergencies, there's masks, stopping people going to school, giving them seriously dangerous drugs instead of really simple, cheap things that work for acute respiratory viruses that you don't know much about. The same things always work, always have. And what they were doing is just telling us not to use them because you're using remdesivir, which the nurses called remdesivir. I mean, and they were pretty spot on. It actually caused more deaths, I think, than the COVID.
Yeah. Do you know anyone who died from COVID from the virus itself?
Yes, I do.
Know.
Yes, I do.
How many people do you know who died from the COVID virus?
One. And you know what? He was a colleague, and he came back to help out. And I was at medical school with him, so he's my age. And you should argue perhaps he shouldn't. But he did. But this is because he actually had a serious sickle cell trait because he was originally from Nigeria. And they have this trait to protect them from malaria. Now, the reason they dies from this is very, very simple. And that is their normal oxygen saturation is set lower. So if you have something that reduces your saturation, which COVID did, say from 100 down to 90, most people could cope. But if your upper limit of normal is about 90 and it goes down to 80, then that was the issue. So he had an underlying reason, as did everybody else that I know, that especially there are children who've died with COVID, and we said, no, they're never going to die with that. And of course, when you look, these are poor kids with leukemia. They're high risk of dying from any infection. So that's the only one, and that was a good scientific rationale why he did.
So, and how many people do you know personally who died from the COVID vaccine?
I know at least 3 people personally. We're not talking all the patients. I mean, I've seen many patients. 3 people personally who've died from the vaccine. Now, 2 of them contacted me after the booster, all 3 of the booster vaccines. That I spoke to them because they didn't feel very well after the booster vaccine. So the people saying it's just coincidence. No, it's not. In fact,
it's just coincidence that they feel bad right after they never shot.
Improved. And then one of them moved into, oh, you're suffering from long COVID, which long COVID after the vaccine is far more common than after COVID, I've discovered. And so you start thinking of ways to help treat this. And then I found I had a couple of friends falling into that category, and then they both said, oh, I've got very bad back pain or hip pain and stuff. I said, this is not long COVID. You never get those sort of things with it. We've got to do scans. And 2 of these people, it was nearly like they were in parallel. And I had got them, both had to get emergency scans because they were feeling really bad with symptoms down the legs and things. And they were both riddled with bone metastases down the spine. And both of them had hips destroyed, that they had to have hip replacements. And one of them had myeloma, the other had melanoma. So there were different causes. But as an oncologist, I have never seen this presentation ever before. Bone metastases like that often come as single spies. They don't come with catastrophic collapse and everything of the system. And when I look back at the messenger RNA sort of workup manual of things which was certainly not exposed, messenger RNA caused severe deformities in the bones of mice and rats. Now that should have been a concern. I'm pretty sure that's the link. And the other fellow had,
It wasn't just a coincidence, huh?
I mean, as Paul Marrick likes to say, anecdotes are anecdotes, but when you have 1,000 of them, they're called a database. And I agree with it. You don't need all this randomized this, that, and the other. It's very obvious, and it strikes me this is very, very similar to the fight we had, and I was a medical student when it was coming to a head, and that smoking caused lung cancer. When it was, as we say in England, it was so obvious that even the policemen would notice. And they were still denying that there was no evidence, there was no randomized study to prove it. How are you going to prove it? Etc. And this is very reminiscent of this. They know, but they don't want to know. And they're trying to prevent the obvious from being made official. This is exactly what's going on.
So when I asked you whether there was a benefit at all, and you said that there was no benefit at all, how do you know that, right? Because we can't be telling people what we believe without hard data to back it up. So what data do you have to back up your statement that you didn't think that there was any benefit at all? What's the data behind that?
Well, I don't have a database I can just show and prove it. What I do have is that the so-called benefit of the vaccine that was rolled out. There may have been a few elderly people that the first vaccine did in fact boost the T-cell response for a while and help improve things. I mean, there's probably a few people that fell into that group. But overall, I don't think there was any benefit. And one of the reasons that I would say that is that when you look, and Claire Craig, has looked through all these facts and figures and done a wonderful book called Spiked. I mean, I don't know if you've read it, but it's...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've got it.
But I mean, the bottom line, just to sum it up in cartoon form, is that, when we had the big first wave in the UK, it was coming down there. Lockdown was introduced there, credit taken there. When they introduced the vaccines, this next wave was coming down there, vaccines introduced there, credit taken, credit taken, credit taken. That's why I don't believe it. Lockdowns did only damage. They did no benefit, zero benefit. And I believe that when you look back at the vaccines, it will be the same thing. The vaccines only induced a bit of a T-cell kick in the first one, perhaps a little one too, not nearly as much as they should have, because I lobbied that they should be T-cell inducing vaccines, not antibody inducing vaccines. No, they were made to push this massive boost of antibodies. And of course, that was the justification for the booster, because the antibodies started to wane. Of course they start to wane. That's what happens after any infection and after any vaccination. If they didn't wane, we would be mummified by our blood being completely full up of antibodies from all the diseases that we were introduced. Of course they have to wane. And that is what causes when you do the next booster, it puts more useless antibodies out there at the expense of T-cell. The T-cells give up. And as I mentioned, probably one of the most important papers in the COVID era was a paper from the Spanish group, which I mentioned, from Madrid, which had this beautiful title, said everything. It said T-cell exhaustion after the third SARS messenger RNA vaccine in cancer patients. And the data was fantastic. Fortunately, nobody realized how important that was, so nobody tried to retract it. Thank goodness.
Oh, wow. Boy, that's a first. Are they trying to retract it now?
Now I publicized it, they may try to, but it is absolute great data. And we were looking to do similar in my laboratory and found the same thing, that it did reduce the T cell. But I never published it in the end, because that paper came out and it was so good, you couldn't compete with it, and didn't need to, because the numbers there were so significant.
So are you getting any more vaccines personally? And have they come after your license to practice medicine?
Well, that's an interesting thing. They know what I think, and I guess I've got what I call my retaliation in first by attacking the GMC for what they were doing. And I've supported and many people who have been attacked by the GMC, and I can see absolutely no grounds for it. In fact, I think that they've shown they're not fit for purpose. They're not fit to sit in judgment of good doctors. That they listen to a rabble rousers, almost certainly paid by drug companies to cause all this problem. And I'm absolutely pretty sure this is the case because we now know all the people who went on television on Good Morning shows and all this sort of nonsense to say, you know, these vaccines are safe, effective, you must get them. We now know all of them have been paid by AstraZeneca or Pfizer, what have you, and they all denied it initially. So I think these people are receiving funds to do this. It's vexatious complaints against individual doctors because they want high profile people to be taken down. I think my main thing is my position that I'm one of the very few doctors who understands virology, immunology, oncology in unbelievable depth. Because you know, on my HIV work, I did so much receptor work on that, and you know, so I actually do know what I'm talking about. I've actually sat on the boards of lots of vaccine companies, including messenger RNA vaccines, which is why I know they will never ever work. You know, it is insoluble for infectious diseases. So I've yet to find anybody who will go against me. Once I was asked to take part in a debate on whether we should continue with the vaccines by GB News. Do you know GB News in America?
Of course, yeah.
They've now got a very good American office. And I went in there to take part in the debate, and Jacob Rees-Mogg was the host. And he said, you'll be sitting here and I'll be talking. I said, well, I thought I was having a debate. And he told me they had asked 50 leading scientists in the United Kingdom to come on and debate the COVID vaccines. All of them accepted, except when they knew they were debating with me, all of them withdrew.
Wow.
What does that tell you? And he told me that up front in view of everybody. And I said, I mean, that is incredible. So he said, we'll just be having a discussion. We've had to cancel the debate because nobody will debate with you.
Oh, wow.
And when
well, you know, it's interesting because you know, Paul Offit says that science can't be debated. So what's interesting is that all of these people were happy to debate, to come to a debate, to convince people that their logic is sound, and then when they find out who they're up against, you said 50 people declined?
50. Yeah, I said I thought it was 5. He said no, 50. I said I didn't know.
5-0.
I didn't know that many experts in COVID, but he said no, they're all happy to get the exposure and discuss, but they all withdrew when they said they'd be debating with me.
All of them withdrew. So that tells you that science is not about that you can't debate science. Paul Offit should be more honest and say, well, we can't debate science with anybody who might know what they're talking about and might show that we're wrong.
Yes.
That's what he should say.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I agree.
If he was honest,
Yeah,
which he's not.
Yeah, I agree.
So
staggering insight into that. I saw it all as complete suppression. You know, that's what I've been, all sorts of brickbats thrown at me every which way. Our chief medical officer, who I've openly called, an unbelievably stupid person, basically dismissed all the things I've said on the grounds I'm merely a cancer doctor. I know nothing about vaccines and immunology. My God, I know darn sight more than that whole lot of them advise.
Wow.
Them. So that's how they dismiss me. It's like, you know, they will use any excuse to say, oh, don't listen to him, this, that, and the other. He only knows about HIV. I mean, this is just ludicrous kind of dismissal of everything. Mm.
So when they dismiss me because you're not a doctor and you don't treat patients and all that, it's like, oh, well, if I was a doctor, then it would be, well, you're not a virologist, so like there's always the next
Right.
level here. What was your, when was the last time you got a vaccine?
Pardon?
When was the last time you got a vaccine?
Oh,
You pers-
years and years and years and years. And for when COVID came along, I was working on what I regarded as the best vaccine going, which again, I would hesitate to call it a vaccine now. It's more of an immune stimulant. It was a heat-killed mycobacteria, which was processed in such a way that it boosted the innate immune response, which is the secret of all immunity for viruses, cancer, everything. And we had shown it boosted NK and gamma delta T cells. Well, if you've got an unknown virus, that's exactly what you want. You don't want antibodies. Antibodies actually get in the way. They're useless. So
right.
I injected myself with this antibody because I noticed that all my melanoma patients who were on a trial with it, not one of them got colds or flu. In fact, their partners said, well, I don't know what it's doing for his cancer, doctor, but he's never had a cold or flu since he's been on that program, and he used to be in bed for weeks during the winter.
And injecting with what?
It's a heat-kill mycobacterium. We called it IMM 101. It was made by a Modulin, who sadly ran out of money, so it's not not available. And so I gave it to myself, and I measured my T cell response, and it was twice as good as anybody half my age, and it was far better than all those who'd been vaccinated with AstraZeneca or Pfizer.
So this company that has this drug that boosted people's T cells, it went out of business. What's going on there? How's that happen?
Well, I'll tell you what I do think has gone on there. I mean, I've been involved in lots of vaccines. We did the trials with all the big ones for melanoma, MARG, MART, new NYEs. I did the lot. This is far superior to any of them. And we tried to get interest in the drug companies, and some of them, good flag bearers, took it forward. It always got pushed back as it's a bit low tech for us. It's a bit steep. Of course it is. That's why it works.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and one of the guys, this is true. So one of the guys in the company I will not mention who thought that this was very good because we'd already shown that if you give this substance to somebody who's got a cancer, and they then relapse and you use a checkpoint inhibitor and then these new antibodies, Pembro, Nevo, etc., that if you primed with this agent, just a little intradermal injection, not subcutaneous, not intramuscular, little intradermal, the response to Pembro or Nevo was twice what it would be to the single agent. And I thought this is just fantastic, job accomplished. And then we found that these big companies weren't interested. And I was told by somebody who left the company that it was obvious that if they were to push ahead with this, it would greatly interfere with their revenue stream downstream from Plan B, Plan C antibodies, which are selling at $100,000, whereas this you could do for a few $100s a year. I mean, and it has a far better outcome. So I believe that we've got randomized studies with this in HIV, TB, not only melanoma, but a big one in prostate cancer, and still the FDA and the regulatory authorities want us to do an even bigger study. Sorry, why do you do bigger studies? We've never had an SAE, serious adverse event, 3 or 4, ever in thousands of patients. And I say thousands because studies done on HIV and TB in Africa were in the thousands. Never had that. And every study's been a positive. We've never had a negative. So why would you want to make a company, and these trials cost 30, 40 million, why would you want to make them do that with such good safety data and efficacy data unless you didn't want them to get approval? And I believe that's what's behind it. And I really do believe it. And I said to people, what we ought to do now is get an organization that goes to the FDA and said, here's the data, this, that, and the other. You might think that you need another randomized trial. No, you don't. You do it for unexpected adverse events, which we've got thousands, and you do it for efficacy. You add all this stuff up. There's no need for efficacy. you do it phase 4. You approve it and you go. And I know this because I developed lenalidomide with Celgene, who'd almost certainly have taken this on. They were going to take it on, but they were bought out by BMS, who had no interest in any research, killed it or what have you. But it was my idea to take thalidomide and make analogues because I wasn't worried about the birth defect. That's easy to avoid. But thalidomide had a really inevitable neuropathy that prevented long-term use. So I really pushed for them to make analogues. Eventually they did, and we screened them. And at any rate, the first one that we took forward and did further research on is now known as lenalidomide. It's one of the biggest selling drugs in the world for myeloma, lymphoma. That was approved on a phase 4 because the data was so good in the phase 2 data that they approved it for sale and use because it was so clearly much better. That's what they ought to be doing here. Celgene at the time were big enough, they recruited the big guys to go here and tell the regulatory authorities, look, we know your job because we've been there. This is what you do. Approve it. Bang, right. Phase 4 means you just got to give regular reports back. So that's what they should do.
Right. So are all of the, there are, 190 countries where you could get a drug approved. Why, if you're being stonewalled in certain countries, why can't you just go keep knocking on the next door and the next door? Is it just because of time and expense that you, and you don't know what, and it's even worse in other places? Or what's the reason they just don't say, okay, let's skip the US and skip, these guys don't care.
Yeah, but anybody who's looking to invest or back or gets anywhere near the conventional approach says, oh no, it has to be done in a country where other countries will latch on. And now there are a few countries that if you get a drug approved now, this is quite a recent change, the other countries have signed up to a thing to fast track it approval. So you should really get probably the easiest country,
correct,
to do the approval,
to approve it. Yep.
And then spread it through. That would be the strategy that I'd like to see somebody take. Yeah. My issue with regards to all this, it is clear that I'm not that popular with the regulatory authorities.
So are there any regulatory authorities where you are popular? Are there any can you name an honest regulator in the entire world?
Well, if they do exist, they have not let me know.
Okay. So maybe, and how would they contact you if they wanted to take you up on your offer?
Well, that would be very, very easy to contact me. I mean, I have my email address is very easy to find. I'm associated with a charity, the Institute of Cancer Vaccines and Immunotherapy, which gives away roughly what we do in its title, and it's got a website and contacts, etc. So I'm not difficult to get hold of.
All right, great. So I've spent a lot of time looking at the statistics that the CDC collects, and the statistics in the U.S. are called the underlying cause of death and the multiple causes of death, or the sort of the main death databases. And when you look at those databases, I expected to see rates of cancer. I expected to see kind of maybe going at some trend line, but then I expected to see a step function when the vaccines rolled out. And it wouldn't necessarily be on day one of the vaccines. It could be a gradual increase. But I didn't see a pattern like that was obvious. Am I missing something? Is there a specific ICD-10 code that if I looked at it, I would see, wow, this thing was like flat and stable until after the vaccines rolled out, and then boom, increased by 10% or 20% consistently?
Well, I agree that is a bit of a surprise, but the trend is very clear in the Japan, South Korea, and other agencies where they've looked at this. And even in 2 years ago, when I was touring Australia and New Zealand with Paul Marrick, I mean, their data was all consistent with the increase with the vaccines. In 23, the UK refused to release detailed data, and it went to just this broad data, nothing detailed at all. And people took them to court for not revealing it. And the government won on this on the grounds that if they released it, it would upset too many people and their families. I mean, what is the point when you've actually said this is going to upset people? And
Yeah.
with places that don't have an obvious link, I tell you, I am very, very suspicious that there's been all sorts of obfuscation and meddling and editing, they call it. Meaning oncology, I'm very, very suspicious of a lot of oncology thing because they even use the word data censoring, which is a bit of a red flag. Oh, wait, we haven't censored the data yet. So I'm very suspicious of it. And that Peter McCullough told me that for the Senate, he said, you know, the real data's there in the CDC. They just won't merge it. It's like they don't.
So is there a data set that's publicly downloadable and available where people can look at the trend line and see, oh, flat trend line, and then boom, vaccines hit and there's a step discontinuity? Is there a specific data set that would be that one can look at that would see that?
Well, certainly I've seen Paul Murray present CDC data where there's a slight decline, if anything, in cancer deaths, and then an uptick from 2022 onwards. So as far as I'm concerned, it's there. Are they manipulated? We now know that the government and the powers that be behind this will not stop at anything to fiddle with the data for our own good.
Yeah, for our own good. It's best that you don't know.
Yes, and we don't want you to get upset. I mean,
yeah, we definitely don't want to have people upset. They might take action or get rid of us. So, no honest public health official. That is pretty stunning.
yes.
It's what I found though is that I've been at this for a while, and at first I thought, hey, I just show people the data. They look at the data. They say, oh, that's really anomalous. This looks like bad news. This doesn't jive with what we've been told, but this is reality. And for me, that wake up call happened very early when I got a direct message on Twitter, and the person asked me, is the vaccine safe? I showed him that it was, because that's what I was told. And I asked him, why are you asking me that question? And she said, well, 3 of my relatives got the shot and they're dead. Now they're dead 1 week later after the shot. And I said, well, that can happen. That's statistically impossible. And she said, yeah, but they're dead. And that's what kind of got me on this track to say, wait a minute. That I've never heard a story like that in my life. Not for any other vaccine. So what were your numbers? What were your personal numbers in terms of these turbo cancers? How many turbo cancers were you seeing a year before the shots rolled out? How many turbo cancers per year in your practice were you seeing before the shots rolled out?
Right. We're told to call turbo cancer hyper-progressive cancers now, so I just use that.
Oh, yeah, we can. Yeah, that's the safer term.
Yeah, but people don't understand it. That's why they want to use it. I would say a couple of years before they rolled out. After they rolled out, my practice changed quite a bit because I stopped being full-time university NHS. I became part their time, and then I just see patients privately now. But so therefore, I would expect to see less. But I'm horrified at the ones that I do see. A lot of the ones I do see self-refer because they've had cancer progression after being diagnosed early and being treated and progressing. And we find that these are very hyper-progressing cancers. And the insight I got that when I went to Australia and New Zealand and I was been away for a month, I saw 6 people that urgently want to see me in 1 week. And they'd all had what you would call hyperprogressive cancers. And they'd all had vaccine boosters. Now, I'll tell you something that is the real cause. They'd all seen at least a dozen doctors, GPs, physicians, surgeons, pathologists, chemotherapists, radiotherapists. I was the only doctor that asked any of them for their COVID vaccine history.
Yeah.
So, and
Oh,
when
wow.
I say about the association,
Wow.
these doctors say, well, there's no evidence. Of course, there's no evidence because they don't take a vaccine history.
Don't it?
I mean, in my day, I would have failed my exams if I hadn't taken a full past medical history, family history, drug history, and vaccine history.
Yep.
Nobody is taking any vaccine history. So, of course, they're not going to put 2 and 2 together unless.
Yeah, they'll probably ask you about everything else except for how many COVID shots you've had.
That's right. That's right. And I mean,
So you were seeing 2 a year of these turbo cancer cases, 2 a year. What were you seeing after the shots rolled out? How many turbo cancer?
well, it seemed to me to be seen at least a couple every clinic I do. And I'm only doing a clinic about once every fortnight because I'm moving around at meetings and lectures a lot. So you can see, I was seeing hundreds of patients before, and now I'm just seeing a few dozen. But I'm seeing more in the few dozen since the vaccine shot than I saw in hundreds of patients before. So that to me is highly significant, and it's not anecdotal as people say. Oh, it's just anecdotal. I'm very good at sniffing if things are likely to be
Yeah.
related.
Yeah,
Very
it's always the thing that they throw at you is that, oh, well, that's just an anecdote. It's like I have a friend, um, Jay Bonner, and I've written about him, and he had about 14 or so, a little bit more than that, of his friends who died after they rolled out the vaccines. And before the vaccines, he had not lost any friends. And suddenly they roll out the vaccines, and 14 people that he knows dies, all of whom were vaccinated, and 4 of the 14 died on the same day as the vaccine, and 3 of the 4 were under 30. Now, does that sound like, oh, that's just a coincidence? Or does that
Yes,
sound like
but
cause and effect to you?
Steve, well. I mean, sort of Claire and others pointed this out that if you died within 14 days after a vaccine, you were unvaccinated. I mean, and I told you that this is obfuscation and manipulation and evasion, everything. It is clear if you die straight after the vaccine, you died because you're vaccine. And we know you get allergic reactions, also, a total collapse, all kinds of things with it. But they don't count, so they won't put in theirs because you didn't start making antibodies till day 14. Therefore, anything that happened, including dying at the end of the needle, acute poisoning, has nothing to do with the vaccine. It's pure coincidence. Only after day 14. But of course, the high early morbidity was all in the first 2 weeks of the vaccine. And they especially things from myocarditis and giving it to young people is prime. And we pointed out, that you shouldn't give anything that stimulates the ACE2 receptors because they're higher density. The fitter you are and the younger you are, the higher the density and the more likely you are to react to a spike protein locking onto them. It was pure madness. I think it's total, and I use these words carefully. I think the people behind the vaccine, the people who approved them, and the people who pushed other doctors are guilty of criminal medical negligence. Because if I can find out all this before the vaccine's released and warn everybody, so that's the other thing, they didn't even have to do their own homework. We warned everybody this would happen, and they decided to ignore us. Me dismissed as a cancer doctor. What do I know? This level of dismissal, refusal to engage in debate by people you were talking about is criminal, I believe.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
like it's basically saying, don't do that because what you're going to do will kill that person. No, it won't. Bang. Oh, so it has. Well, you should have warned me sooner. He couldn't make it up.
Have you convinced any of your peers that you're right about this? I mean, have you convinced anyone who's been blue pilled on this? Have you opened their eyes? Have people come to you and say, "Oh, I agree with you. You're a hero here. I used to believe in the safe and effective vaccines, but you're right. But please don't tell anyone. I don't want to get."
Yeah, I mean, well, the answer is yes from lots of younger doctors. And they say, I support you 100%, but it's made very clear that I could lose my job if I come out publicly and criticize the vaccines. And I've got a big mortgage and two children at private school. It would be devastating. That's how they're wholly threatening. More importantly, I've had two colleagues of a long time who basically have attacked me for pointing out these things in the vaccine. And interestingly, both of them sent me a Lancet paper saying they're safe and effective. There you are, no need to be concerned. Both of them had all sorts of things that went on, all of which are associated with the vaccines. And one of them told me, well, thank God I continue to have the vaccines. Otherwise, this thing could have killed me. The vaccine caused something.
Good thing.
Yeah,
good thing.
That's called cognitive dissonance.
Right. And so are you able to reach those people at all? Or are these people like, there's just no way to connect with them? Because what I found is that I've constantly been trying to challenge people on, hey, let's have a discussion where we can analyze the data. And what happens is that you end up talking past each other because I would like to think that they're not listening to what I'm saying, but the point is that they're basically so stuck in their belief system that they'll interpret any data as consistent with that belief system, and any data that you throw that's inconsistent, they'll tell you why it's wrong. And so you end up spending a lot of time to get nowhere because people are not looking at the data objectively. I'd like to think that I'm looking at the data objectively myself, but there's probably some of that happens to me as well, where I have some blinders on and I'm interpreting the data not as objectively as I should, which is why it's super helpful to me to use the AI, because it catches me on those and says, but wait a second, there are these other things that you should point out. Don't be so confident. And I'll look at that and I'll say, I agree. Yeah, you're right. This is a good point. Because it's really hard to tell from the data that's out there whether the vaccines were a net harm or benefit. It seems like from the anecdotal data that it's much, much more obvious. You do the public surveys, for example, and you ask people, hey, how many people in your family died from COVID? How many people died from the vaccines? And they're about equal numbers. And that would be pretty consistent with what the data shows. But the benefits are, there's a huge benefit caused by selection bias, which is not a real benefit. And so trying to get the real benefit out of that is being masked by the selection bias is really, really difficult to do statistically, and nobody's been successful in doing that. So they can't know. In fact, there's FDA memo by Vinay Prasad before he left saying, hey, we don't know whether these shots were beneficial or not, which is great. An honest public official. I wish that the whole agency, the FDA, would be as honest as he was and say, hey, we developed these vaccines and we're putting them out there, but to be honest with you, we don't know whether these vaccines will actually be beneficial to you or not. I think they would, if they're trying to repair their credibility, they would be better served by being honest with the public about about that they honestly don't know, that the data is too confounded, and it could be that they're dangerous. That would be a heck of a lot more honest than these claims, because the big data, when you analyze it, I can show you lots and lots of big data graphs that have where there's very minimal processing, adjustment, as they call it in the papers. You take the raw data, you don't adjust it at all. If the vaccines really worked, you would not be seeing these trends. And the trends that you do see in this big data is always consistent with the vaccines really didn't do very much in terms of a benefit. It's all consistent with that hypothesis. That doesn't mean that it wasn't beneficial. It just means that the data is also consistent with the hypothesis that the vaccines did nothing, or perhaps were not beneficial on a net basis.
Yeah, and I think, as I said before, I think that if they did do any good, it was right at the very beginning when they were introduced to elderly people who had a poor immune response, and it just boosted their T cell and an antibody just at the right time. So it was just a very brief window, and I would say pointless. When you actually, the amount of money we spent for vaccines that didn't, pointless.
Right. Well, I've looked at the Medicare data from CMS from the nursing homes, and anyone is free to analyze that data. And I can tell you that what's supposed to happen when you roll out a vaccine to a closed community like that is the case fatality rate is supposed to go lower when you're within the same variant. The case fatality rate didn't go lower.
Yeah.
It didn't reduce. It didn't work in the very population that was supposed to be a miracle cure. It didn't work. The numbers aren't there. If it had worked, we would have seen a decrease in the case fatality rate on a population basis, and we didn't.
See it.
I don't know how people can go and conclude otherwise from that data.
Yeah, well, I totally agree, and I agree with you completely. I'm just saying that I get bombarded with people saying, well, it must have helped some people, whereas I'm saying that the only people it could have helped would be so few. It was a waste of time and transient. And they were counted as evidence and proof. And then when it rolled out, it was clear that nobody was benefiting. And then especially when people were getting COVID after the vaccine.
Yep.
Yeah. And, people got these problems after COVID, and the people who defended the vaccine said, well, it obviously had nothing to do with the vaccine because it's all related to COVID. But sorry, they caught the COVID after the vaccine that should have guaranteed them they would never get COVID again. I mean, so the illogic is unbelievable. It goes round and round in circles. It's like dealing with Alice in Wonderland.
Right.
People
so these colleagues of yours that admitted that, hey, this is very troubling, did they all realize the same logic that we've been talking about here? And they just can't go public about it because they don't want to lose their jobs. So they recognize what's going on.
Well, I think the young people are very honest. They feel that they don't want to lose their jobs in their career because they've seen it happen. They take people out and shoot them as a warning to others, like a thing, and that's been very, very bad that this has happened. A couple of people, it is like they've been totally brainwashed, and that no amount of discussion or logic is going to sway them. I mean, when they both basically said, well, if I hadn't have had the vaccines, I could have been dead with what happened.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't see.
It's quite astonishing.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, I really want to thank you for taking the time to speaking with me today and to allowing us to
no, it's been a pleasure. And all the
chat
things
about
you brought up, it's been really good, very good learning for me too. That your work. And
don't take any more vaccines. That would be my advice to you: is stay away from those vaccines and always take what the health authorities tell you with a grain of salt. or maybe 2 or 3 grains of salt.
Yeah. And my other big message is that there are things out there like that so-called vaccine I worked on, which sadly has fallen, which are the obvious things to do that protect you from all vaccines because it's NK gamma delta cells and mucosal immunity that protects you, and they're boosted by this vaccine. All these so-called specialist messenger RNA, they don't target the T cells.
You know, it's amazing there isn't some entrepreneur out there that has a passion for this, that they should contact you and get this thing restarted.
I would love them to, because at the moment we don't have a batch to give people, and even when I need to boost myself, then I don't have it. So, and we know that it worked. I mean, I actually had my own.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Maybe I should talk to RFK about this.
I think you should. I actually contacted him, but I haven't had a reply.
Oh, why don't you send? You've got my email. Send me an email with a description, and I'll see if I can get funding while he's still there.
Yeah, he's in an ideal position to do something.
This sounds awesome.
It falls under the Repurposed Drug Act, of things, just moving them across. And this would be so easy to do, and just remove this regulatory thing of trying to raise the bar higher and higher, knowing you'll eventually run out of money.
Right. Well, so here's the interest, and here's the best thing, though. People, the press is going after him, saying that Kennedy's anti-vaccine. So here he would be
ideal for him. He could push this thing and call it a vaccine.
Exactly. In which case, they can't say he's anti-vaccine because he's actually trying to get this vaccine on the market.
Yeah. Right.
As long as he has we have to make it clear that he has no monetary or conflicts of interest in doing so. That's the most important thing. But this would be awesome for him, because now he could say, look, here's proof that I'm not anti-vaccine. Here's a vaccine that actually is beneficial to people. I'm all for it. I'm just not for vaccines which kill people.
Exactly. And, the other amazing thing is I'm the greatest champion of this vaccine approach, because I've seen it so superior for viruses and cancer. I have no financial interest in it either.
Right. Send me the write-up. I'll make sure he sees it.
Yeah. Okay, I will do that. Great.
I think this would be a win-win.
Great.
We did something on this episode.
Yeah, that would be really something useful to come out. Would be just fantastic.
Great.
But before we let you go, Angus, I wanted to follow up on your experience at Senator Ron Johnson's hearing. And I wanted to read Richard Blumenthal's opening statement, first sentence that he wrote, which is, "I'd like to begin my remarks by reminding those watching today that the National Cancer Institute has concluded that, quote, there is no evidence that COVID-19 vaccines cause cancer, lead to recurrence, or lead to disease progression. That is the National Cancer Institute. There is no evidence that COVID-19 vaccines cause cancer, lead to recurrence, or lead to disease progression." Did you get a chance to speak with Senator Richard Blumenthal or anyone else that was there from the...
No, they all left.
Oh, wow. They all left. You can't talk to them.
So he
not that talking to them would make any difference, but...
No, it made no difference.
That's astonishing, to quote Paul Merrick.
It's stunning that these people are in the positions that they're in of power and basically have no interest at all in listening to anyone who disagrees with them.
And the most interesting, from my point of view, was the head of ASCO saying that she represented 50,000 doctors and they all believed there was no link between the vaccines and the cancer. Well, that, I can assure her, means that she doesn't talk to any of her own doctors. Because I know one of the people I know who developed a recurrence of a lymphoma after having a booster vaccine, and he only had it so he could travel to a relative's wedding abroad.
So aren't you under oath when you testify in Congress?
Yeah.
So isn't it perjury if you say there's no none of our members like
Yeah, it is. It's completely bland. But at any rate, this person who I knew, he felt ill after his booster vaccine. He started getting lumps, and this is documented with PET scans and loads of people too. The lymphoma comes back, and he goes back to his oncologist in America. So they were an ASCO fellow, and he said, "This has happened." He said, "This guy asked." He said, "Have you had a booster vaccine?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "What do you think? Why have I relapsed after all this time?" He said, "It's almost certainly the booster vaccine." He said, "I'm seeing it very regularly." Now he's in ASCO. Why didn't he tell her? The representative has said there's no evidence. I bet he did. It's just been suppressed because I know people high up in ASCO who say my evidence is just anecdotal, that they don't see it. Well, they don't see it because they don't see patients anymore. They're too high up.
So it would have been pretty interesting if somebody on that Senate panel, Senator Johnson, for example, could have reminded the witness that they're under oath, and that if their statement is found to be incorrect, they could be prosecuted for perjury. I wonder if she would have said, "Oh, well, in that case, I would say, let me rephrase my remark."
Yeah.
Did you get to speak to her casually before or after to Julie?
Oh, that's a great question.
Sorry?
Did you get to speak
Did you get to
Julie
speak with
Grillo?
her? The
No.
ASCO.
No, I didn't.
Why? What happened? Did she just
Well,
leave?
we were kind of siphoned off into two groups, and she was in a separate group. And then by the time we were leaving, she was nowhere to be seen. And to be quite honest, I didn't want to engage, because I think Ron Johnson did a very good job saying, well, if you think that's the case, and now you've heard all this evidence from these people, 5 experts who all say there is, don't you think you ought to perhaps ask and do a little bit of research? But he got us to admit that. So I couldn't really have done much more than that. But I thought Ron was a superb chairman and interrogator. He had great flair and timing, and the flip charts saying, sorry, how do you explain this? When he had all that data there, I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
Well, someone that was curious, if she was really truly curious in helping people, I would assume that she would engage with you and Aseem Malhotra and the others that were there to just have a conversation, to learn a little bit about what you're seeing, that she's
she didn't come over and talk to us. Other people did, so that's why we never got to engage with them. Blumenthal, he and the others of similar ilk all disappeared. Halfway through in the discussion, they just didn't want to take part in it. They just disappeared.
Right. Yeah, it becomes impossible for people to engage, and when they refuse to have a conversation with the people who disagree with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Dalgleish, thank you so much. That was a riveting conversation. Thank you for being here. For our audience that would like to follow your work, how can they follow the work you're doing or find you?
Well, I think probably the best way for following contact is, I don't do all these social media things, because I took a decision that it would interfere with my work, and I think it's probably right. But with regards contacting and things like ideas about being able to resurrect the vaccine, which is not a vaccine, but we will call it a vaccine for Robert Kennedy's purposes, because it just pan boosts. They can get me on. I've got the ICVI, that's the Institute Cancer Vaccines Immunotherapy, ICVI. I have an email address on that anybody can contact me on. And that's a charity that supported all my early immunotherapy work, because the big cancer charities like CRUK told me that the idea of immunotherapy for cancer was a concept that only applied for mice. and the world experts had agreed that it would never translate to the human condition. I wish I could dig them all up now and have a discussion with them.
Yeah. Well, Janet will put that link in the chat. Thank you. And thank you for your time and all the work that you're doing, creating awareness for many. And I think it is having an impact on many people, even if they're being quiet for the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure to talk with you all. It really has.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And everyone hang in there. I got a few announcements to make before we wrap things up. I want to remind you that VSRF is a small grassroots nonprofit, and everything we do is made possible by your support. And if you're able, please consider supporting us. Text VSRF to 53555 or visit vacsafety.org/donate. I'll put it up on the screen and repeat it. If you're able to, consider supporting us. Text VSRF to 53555 or visit vacsafety.org. And if you haven't already, please take a moment to sign our petition to appeal the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act and share it with your family, friends, coworkers, and across your social media networks. Thank you for being part of this and for helping us continue this mission. Janet will put the link in the chat. And next week, please join us next Tuesday as we welcome filmmaker Dean Rainey, Dan Hartman, and producer Jason Levine to discuss their latest film, The Shot, which tells the heartbreaking story of Dan's son, Sean Hartman. This powerful documentary shows a family's unimaginable loss and their determination to ensure Sean's story is never forgotten. Join us for this moving conversation about the film, the inspiration behind it, and the message its creators hope will resonate with audiences everywhere. And again, that's next week, next Tuesday night. Steve, great conversation. Angus is a fantastic man. I feel honored to have met him last week and to have him on tonight.
Yeah, it's awesome. It was an awesome conversation.
Awesome. All right, we're going to close out with the trailer of Dean Rainey's film, next week's guest, The Shot. Thank you, and have a great evening, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Good night.
Welcome back to Cincinnati, where medical personnel have been working on Bill Safety Damar Hamlin for the last 9 minutes. Hamlin made a hit, got up, took a couple of steps, and then just fell to the ground.
In 2021, with the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccines, we witnessed cardiac arrests in athletes like we've never seen before.
The evidence is getting stronger all the time, to the point, in my opinion, where it's difficult to argue that the vaccine has not had terrible consequences.
Multiple research reports show that heart inflammation risks tied to the vaccines may be far greater and maybe even more dangerous than previously reported, particularly among young men.
Unfortunately, my only son had to have a shot to play hockey. He was forced into it, coerced into it, told it was safe and effective. After my son Sean took his first Pfizer shot, he was found dead on the floor beside his bed on the morning of September 27, 2021.
There's tens of thousands of others, children, that have been severely harmed by this COVID-19 gene therapy.
And so we launched a lawsuit against Pfizer for wrongful death. We also launched a lawsuit against the government of Canada for fraud and deceit.
I miss my boy, and I want him back, and I know he's never coming back. And the combination of rage and sadness is powerful. People, please join me in the fight and help me beat them. For Sean and for everybody.